morning. It is Monday, April 27, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, fear of aftershocks has Nepal on edge as the death toll of the weekend's earthquake and avalanches rises to nearly 3,000. The Israeli military conducts airstrikes in the area between Israel and Syria, targeting a group of militants allegedly trying to plant a bomb on the Israeli border, and fresh reports of airstrikes in Syria. And later on the show, an exclusive interview with Times senior political analyst Joe Klein about U.S.-Israel relations in the wake of the Iran nuclear agreement. Good morning, I'm Yael Avin. We begin straight with breaking news from the northern border of Israel and Syria. Joining us first on the phone is Haaretz senior defense correspondent Amir Oren. Amir, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail.
Well, we're hearing, several reports over the course of the last days and the weekend of airstrikes in Syria, supposedly Israel, one on the border confirmed. But this morning, just now, reports emerging about airstrikes in Syria, supposedly on a missile or a weapons factory, and reports of fatalities. Is Israel striking again? Did Israel strike again overnight in Syria?
Well, official sources, of course, would neither confirm nor deny. But one should take note that these are separate incidents in different sectors for different reasons. The most recent report that you're alluding to has to do with strategic weapons, which Israel has vowed to bar the removal from Syria and transfer to Hezbollah and Lebanon, because they are advanced and accurate and could hit Israeli air bases if a new war erupts.
Right.
What happened last night around 9:30 Golan time was that a squad of about 4 perpetrators tried to reach the border fence between the Israeli-held Golan Heights and the Syrian territory in order to plant some demolition charge. They were spotted by Israeli reconnaissance, and there was an airstrike against this particular squad, but this is a local incident. It has nothing to do with the other incidents, unless this particular incident was in retaliation for the Israeli airstrikes.
No, exactly. And as you rightfully mentioned, it's hard to make sense of all the locations in Syria or whatever is left of Syria where those airstrikes are taking place. But just going back to these fresh reports that we're hearing, and of course there's no confirmation that it is Israel that hit Syria and that weapons factory supposedly or not. In this case, there are a lot of tension up in the north right now, Israel's border with Syria. Is this leading up to some form of escalation, in your educated opinion, in your expert opinion, with, be it Lebanon, Hezbollah, so to speak, on that side of the border? Or is this something Israel is, if it's Israel, is trying to do to just prevent an escalation?
Well, some escalation is almost inevitable. The question is, will the various sides be able to contain it? And are there enough rational actors all around? Because the Assad regime and even Hezbollah, along with Israel, could be considered rational actors acting out of a strategic calculus. But there are so many other factions, as you mentioned, Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS, various Free Syrian Army groups, and either of them could set off a charge, literally, that would flare up the entire area.
Yeah. Amir Oren, thank you. We'll be following closely the situation up in northern Israel and, of course, in the region as we move along. Biggest news, though, throughout the world and that dominates the news cycle is Nepal, where a growing sense of despair spread yesterday through Kathmandu as the devastated Nepali capital was convulsed by aftershocks that sent residents screaming into the streets. That's a day after an earthquake killed more than 3,000 people, injured about 6,000 and counting. Residents grew frantic, and the government, entirely overwhelmed by the enormousness of the challenge facing the country, struggled to provide relief or much hope. As search teams and aid were streaming in from around the world, UNICEF reported already at least 940 100,000 children in areas affected by the earthquake are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance, citing dwindling water supplies, power shortages, and communication breakdowns. Nearly all of the country's gas and diesel supplies are brought in from India, and with traffic reduced to a crawl along major highways, those supplies could dwindle quickly. Some gas stations in Kathmandu have already run dry. Others are rationing their remaining supplies. On Mount Everest, helicopter rescue operations began yesterday to bring wounded climbers down off the mountain, where at least 18 climbers were killed and another 41 injured in horrific avalanches. Now, sadly, Nepal's devastating earthquake was the disaster experts knew was coming. Just a week ago, about 50 earthquake and social scientists from around the world came to Kathmandu in Nepal to figure out how to get this poor, congested, overdeveloped, shoddily built area to prepare better for the big one, a repeat of 1934 temblor that leveled the city. They knew they were racing the clock, but they did not know when what they feared would strike would happen. Now we all know. We're joined in studio by Channel 2 Foreign Affairs editor Arad Nir. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail.
Also by Eyal Magnus from Magnus International Search and Rescue Organization. Eyal, good morning to you. Before we break it down, let's hear the latest about this tragedy from Nepal and take it from there.
More than 2,400 people. That's the latest death toll from the devastating earthquake that hit Nepal, with aftershocks jolting the area Sunday. A strong 6.7 magnitude impact followed the initial 7.8 quake that struck the region, injuring over 5,500 people.
It was like yesterday. It was very strong. As we read in the newspapers today, for 2 or 3 days such jolts will be felt and people need to be warned.
The world rushed to provide desperately needed aid, with teams pouring in from countries across the globe, including Japan, Germany and the US, which also pledged $1 million to the aid effort.
We are trained in everything from structural collapse to trench rescue, water rescue. We can perform rope rescue. Basically, they train us in any way that they can think of so that we can help.
In the densely populated Kathmandu Valley, thousands of people spent the night outside in freezing temperatures and patchy rain, too afraid to return to their damaged homes.
I saw the buildings fall and nearby sites crumble. Then people escaped from the sites and spent the night inside tents and wherever was available. There are still people who are trapped.
The earthquake rippled through the Nepali capital and spread north towards the Himalayas and Tibet. Avalanches unleashed in the Everest mountain, killing at least 17 people.
We've had a lot of disturbance here due to the earthquake, which was reported in Nepal. All along the place, now it's covered into clouds. We had quite a few big avalanches coming down of those phases. From here, we had quite a bit of rockfall.
The tremor marks the strongest since Nepal's worst earthquake disaster in 1934 that killed 8,500 people. Only 1 week ago, some 50 earthquake experts and social scientists arrived at Kathmandu to help the region better prepare for what eventually took place sooner than they had imagined. They claimed it is not merely a natural seismic fault, but building construction and population density that increases 10 times over the chances of damage and loss of life. As roads to the struck area remain blocked by landslides and hospitals become overloaded, the full scale of the destruction has yet to unfold.
We're now going straight to Kathmandu, where we are joined via satellite by Leo Lifshitz of Rescue One, an aid mission that has landed there several hours ago. Leo, good morning to you. What are the scenes? What have you seen since you arrived in Kathmandu?
Okay, so we arrived in Kathmandu yesterday night. The first people from our team arrived in the morning. It's very difficult to maneuver here because the government took over of all the helicopters. So we do have problems to get helicopters to try to get to people that are in the mountains. We're working pretty hard with the Israeli embassy. We are now in the Israeli embassy compound. There's about 60 Israelis here,
right,
and there's another few hundreds in the mountains. So we're trying to locate them and reach them.
And when you said, you know, helicopters being controlled by the government, as you mentioned, you cannot get anywhere without them. Not just that, but the scenes, describe to us the scenes you've seen since you arrived to Kathmandu. And in terms of the shortage also of supplies, I'm assuming that's already a problem. Sadly, we lost Leo Lifshitz there from Kathmandu. We lost the satellite line. As we can all figure out, when something like this happens, very difficult to maintain phone lines. It just goes to show how incredibly hard it is to not just do aid missions, but that's the time to turn to you first, Eyal Magnus, because we had Leo Lifshitz on the phone. You've been through rescue missions like this.
Yes.
How difficult in an area as such, and sadly, these earthquakes usually happen in overpopulated, underdeveloped countries. What happens when you land there?
Well, as you described, it's extremely complicated. Our mission is to aid the Israelis, specifically the ones which are out in the nature reserve, in the Langtang Nature Reserve, which has sustained the biggest damage of avalanches because of the earthquake. And the country is in a mass disaster, and obviously their focus is not specifically on our citizens in the nature reserve. So getting, as you heard from Lior, getting the means, getting the helicopter permission to take off, getting the jeeps, getting the fuel is extremely hard. We have a team, we have the teams there, as you heard, and they are doing their best, along with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is doing enormous efforts to try to collaborate with the local authorities to get the means to get out to the field and to give help to those Israelis.
To the injured. And these are Israeli missions. Obviously, you know, every country around the world is trying to send aid missions out to Nepal right now. Arad Nir, senior foreign affairs editor of Israeli Channel 2, looking though at Nepal right now, the Kathmandu Valley this is a place that is completely ill-equipped to deal with something like this, isn't it?
We're dealing with one of the poorest countries in Asia. That is one of the poorest countries in the world in the best of days.
Right.
And the information that is coming from there doesn't get any better by the day. As we just seen, the communication lines are very bad. The transport lines, those that were functioning before, the few that were functioning before, are not functioning anymore, and they are pleading for relief. UNICEF, the United Nations Children Fund, just issued a call yesterday, last night, in which they claimed that million Nepali children are in desperate need for urgent humanitarian aid. So the situation is bad over there, and the death toll is just piling. We've just passed the 3,300, nearly 10,000 wounded that need desperate aid, the desperate medical treatment, and they don't have the means to do it. There is one functioning hospital in Kathmandu, and we are dealing with the main city now. We're not dealing with the rural areas, which we don't really know what have happened over there. So, aid teams from all over the world are trying to get into Kathmandu first, and then from there to disperse to the whole region. It's very difficult to get there because the airport is not functioning properly, so you can't land huge cargo planes over there with all the necessary equipment and the necessary teams. So, you know, it's pouring, it's dripping in. There's an international effort to help them, but they need it desperately, and it will take time. Now,
and Eyal Magnus, because, you know, you are part of a team that also does this for a living in many ways. When, as Arad Nir just mentioned, it's trickling in, but something that happens after earthquakes like these, it's not just the aftershocks, it's also the fact that, you know, it's the danger of diseases. What happens after earthquakes if there's no water supplies? I mean, we're looking at now a slew of problems that are coming down the line, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
After a few days, there will be a problem of disease. There will be a problem with the basic things like food and water. There is already a danger of staying in the structures which are still standing because of the fear of the aftershock. Right. So the instructions are to stay outside, which creates a lot of pressure by itself. There is, for the people up in the nature reserve, in Langtang Nature Reserve, which is north of Kathmandu, the roads are cut off, and the avalanches have stopped, but we expect more avalanches from the aftershock, and the cold itself becomes a danger, because once people are cut off and they're forced to stay outside, they have no shelter, the cold itself becomes a life-threatening danger.
And not only that, Arad, as you mentioned, aid that's coming in trickling into these, airport that it can land, then has a huge problem actually making it, in the roads that have been destroyed.
In times like this, we are talking about the epicenter. So we have many epicenters of crises. One is in the Himalaya mountains and the Everest, where, as we just heard, they are stuck, they cannot come in or out, and it's very cold there. We have the rural areas which are completely blocked out from any kind of civilization. And we have the pictures that we see from Kathmandu itself, where people do not have houses to live in. They stay in the streets in tent cities. Now, there's no sewage, there's no medical supply, and even those who survived are facing a humanitarian crisis, what we call, because there is no elementary standard of living over there in order to avoid all these epidemics that may come in, and that there's no food. Nepal is the country with the most, I can call it the most watery country probably in the world, but they don't have drinking water for the population at the moment. They are pleading for all this kind of help. So there are those who are stuck within the rubble, which have to be rescued and pulled out. You need some expertise for it. We see the Nepalese using mainly bare hands doing it. Well, they seem to be quite experienced in it, but it's not enough. They don't have enough teams. This is why the need for international aid and relief is so imminent.
Is paramount. And before we talk about that aid and how Nepal can even jump back from a disaster as such, from the images trickling out of Kathmandu Valley, the earthquake clearly turned the area upside down, as has been discussed here. It's hard to imagine. Let's take a look first at some of these initial pictures trickling in from Nepal over the course of the last several days since the earthquake struck. Radnir, just one more thing. When we look at these pictures, Nepal being so overpopulated, underdeveloped, extremely poor country, how many years does it take to jump back from something like this?
Imminent. I mean, you can't count it, definitely not in a place like this, which is so remote and so detached. I believe that the international community will put an effort to help Nepal, both its countries, which are superpowers, India and China, will try to influence the buildup of Nepal, but it would take a long time and lots of effort, and lots of money.
I'm looking at things like this, and it's reminiscent of Haiti in 2010, and then you're thinking there that the vicinity to the United States probably made it easier to try and rebuild Haiti. And
well, nowadays I tend to think that the geographical proximity is not the main issue in it. It's international will. The problem is, and we've seen it in Indonesia after the tsunami, the earthquake that caused the tsunami in 2004. The international community is pledging lots of funds and lots of money and lots of goodwill until it's time to cash it in. And then they forget about it, and those poor people stay there with the rubble, and they have to struggle with it on their own.
Thanks for a good headline. Eyal, Magnus, quickly to you, the one we heard Leo Lifshitz at the beginning of this broadcast saying that, it's hard to get choppers from the government. I mean, if there's no cooperation from the local authorities, because missions such as yours go there to rescue citizens of Israel, for example, as I'm sure you know, missions of
Yes.
other countries. Without cooperation from the local authorities, it's probably harder than anything else.
It is obviously hard, but the Nepalese are making effort to collaborate with the international rescue efforts. Tourism is an important,
If not one of the only, isn't it? One of
Yes,
the
a very
only
important
incomes, yeah.
industry for Nepal. They know the world's eyes are on them now, and they will not damage rescue efforts. They will help rescue efforts. It is, as we heard here, extremely difficult for them.
Yeah.
What is happening there is understandable. There is no.
It's understandable when things like this happen. It's on a biblical scale
Exactly.
in many ways. But another aspect of this tragedy, and one that touches home for many Israelis, is the issue of dozens of Israeli couples who are in Nepal waiting for local surrogate mothers to give birth to their children and are concerned about the delivery of their long-awaited babies in a country just recently shattered by a major earthquake. Left only a small number of hospitals, as we heard here, still functional, one in Kathmandu, as you said. After a rushed nationalization project late last night, a flight carrying some of the new families arrived in Israel. Now, the surrogacy procedure and paternity confirmation in Israel is complicated. It has been waived, supposedly, in this instance because of the earthquake. But according to law, if the babies are born to a Nepalese surrogate mother, the newborn is a Nepalese citizen. In order to allow for their flight to Israel, a DNA test must be performed to prove the father is an Israeli citizen. Only then will the Israeli embassy issue the newborn Israeli passport. So to further discuss this, we're joined in studio by Guy Tatza, the CEO of Baby Bloom Surrogacy Center. Guy, good morning to you. This has been dominating the news cycle, actually, in Israel. Very hotly debated issue. Let's take a look at the following report and discuss.
Initially, there was shock at images of the tragedy in Nepal. Then, in Israel, concern for relatives stranded there, and among them, 24 babies born to mothers there in just a few days. On Facebook, photos quickly began to circulate of the young parents who became homeless. In Tel Aviv, the offices of Doron Mamet transformed into a war room. His agency helps gay couples to become parents through the use of surrogate mothers in Nepal.
16 babies that were born already in surrogacy processes in Nepal. To evacuate them probably tomorrow or day after, hopefully.
The Likud party of Prime Minister Netanyahu is also active. Amir Ohana in particular got involved in the early hours to try to find some solutions.
I immediately called the Minister of Interior, Gilad Erdan, and MK Miri Regev, who is the chairman of the Interior Committee. And immediately, State of Israel took a decision that the babies would be brought here immediately.
But beyond the babies already born and waiting to be repatriated are also future parents worried about the survival of their surrogate mothers. Ronen's baby is set to be born in the next few days. For 24 hours, he and his lawyer have been on alert.
You have to help us. You're living with the humanitarian team. You have to help us bring back the surrogate mother or bring materials to help her if she needs to give birth tomorrow.
But a problem. In Israel, gay couples are not allowed to use surrogacy to become parents. The government is therefore faced with a difficult choice: transfer the mothers to Tel Aviv by making an exception to the law, or leave them in Nepal despite the dangers there.
This is a matter of life and death, because if she won't come to Israel and try to give birth somewhere in Kathmandu, her life might be in risk and the baby's life might be in risk, and we don't want that to happen, of course.
A few minutes after our conversation, Ronen gets a text message from the Ministry of Justice.
They are willing to bring the surrogate mothers from Kathmandu to Israel, so we are waiting to see how that will happen, but it's great news so far.
It is still too early to know which surrogates will be authorized to board the plane, but the government's decision is unprecedented. Never before in the history of the country have surrogate mothers for gay couples been able to give birth in Israel.
We're joined by Guy Tatza, the CEO of Baby Bloom Surrogacy Center. There is good news this morning, though, for the couple stuck in Nepal, where Israel supposedly is, allowing not just them, the babies without the procedure, but also the surrogate mothers to arrive?
Again, I heard it right now, and I hope this is true. If it is, then it's definitely a change, but it would be much easier if surrogacy for gay men would be available here in Israel like it is available for straight people. And this, I think, is the whole story here.
Yeah, that goes without saying. How many couples are stuck there right now?
From my understanding, and again, usually our center works in the United States, but right now there are 24 couples who are there with babies. 9 of them, from my understanding, left last night and arrived in Israel this morning. The others are, I think, as I was told, in the Israeli embassy, and they're sort of camping because most of these parents, many of them have premature babies, were sent out of the hospital when it collapsed.
No, it's a terrifying notion, as you said. It goes without saying that this would not be the case had, surrogacy parenthood been legalized for gay couples in Israel, which, as you mentioned, would be the whole story. But Radna, you wanted to mention that, Israel is doing what it should be doing, supposedly, right now.
Well, I don't want to touch this particular issue of the babies that were caught in this ordeal over there. But the Israelis have this tendency that when they get into trouble, when they travel overseas in very dangerous places with no infrastructure, etc., or what we said about Nepal before, when they get into trouble, they expect the government to come and help them. Apparently, the Israeli government does come and help them. I myself, I received on this cell phone calls on Saturday morning. We are stuck in the Everest. We need relief now. We are stuck in Kathmandu. Please help us to get government relief now. The government of Israel has to come and help us. This is not obvious. I checked what's happening with other nations. So, for example, the United Kingdom has issued an emergency number in which those in need can call, and the embassy in Kathmandu will help them. Prime Minister of the United Kingdom this morning actually will make his first Cobra meeting in order to discuss the situation in Israel. We are already there and back. The Germans are operating in the very same European fashion. It's only the Israelis that do it. Well, Eyal Magnus is here, and that's his business, as you mentioned before, and this is what he should be doing, and people are paying premium for him to do it, and he's cashing it now. But the government of Israel, I'm not sure that this is the main mission of the government and of the IDF.
No, I agree, but
it has to be discussed, it has to be publicly discussed in times of ease.
Yeah. In general, it should be, but,
Again, in general, it should be discussed, but specifically, Israel put us, as the people going through a surrogacy process in Nepal, in this situation, because we would have done it in Israel, like our fellow straight couples who can do it in Israel if we could. And in this situation, Israel has an obligation, first of all, to change the law, and basically to get these people out.
Guy Tatza and all my esteemed colleagues in the Yemen studio, thank you for being here. When we get back to Syria, first the news. Good morning. Thank you for staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition, the place you should be on this April 27th.
27th.
Thank you. My esteemed colleagues in studio letting me know what date it is, and it's still 2015. For that, in check, I always am covered doesn't sound good. I'm always joined by Ami Kaufman, who joins me daily to discuss the news we've missed while scanning the headlines, and there's been quite a few.
Right. Good morning, Yael. We're going to start with something close to home in Israel. The IDF's military prosecution indicted 3 soldiers for looting during the Gaza war in 2014. They are accused of stealing over 2,000 shekels, about $600, from an apartment of Palestinians in the neighborhood of Shejaiya, which was hit very hard.
One of the focus points of that operation over the summer.
Right.
That is incredibly disturbing.
That is very disturbing. It's not the only case that's going to be opened, by the way, by the IDF. They have about 5 more cases. One of them is a very famous case where soldiers might be charged for the bombing of the UN compound school where refugees were hiding and 21 people were killed.
That's one contention. It's one that actually I think is in contention because Israel says it's being examined from within, while I think the International Criminal Court is looking to, examine that from the outside.
Right.
But it is, to be fair, the fact that at least the IDF is checking these cases from within, one can only say is.
Yeah, well, one could say they're to play the devil's advocate, they're not probably checking enough if you're a Palestinian.
That would be one line to go by that as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Off to Britain, things are heating up with the elections there pretty soon in May. Boris Johnson, the London mayor, and Ed Miliband, the leader of Labour.
He's been the mayor of London for years, hasn't he?
He's been the mayor of London, but he's also a contender, basically, in the future, probably, for the head of the Tory party. They were on the television on BBC's Andrew Marr show and got into a really, really heated debate, bringing in family and some ad hominem attacks, where he said that Boris Johnson told Ed Miliband, "You'll do more damage to the country than you did to your brother." And I think we have this
yes,
clip,
let's have a look.
Look, if you become leader of the Tory party, I'd get rid of Linton if I were you. Honestly, he doesn't do much for you.
I'm not saying that your brother. I'm not saying your brother had to present himself at A&E with a dagger. But he would do
best television of the week so far. It's only just started.
Do more damage to this country than he did to his brother. And that is the key point.
And still so civilized.
Still so civilized in Britain. It's really amazing.
It's like I love that even you can say the nastiest thing with a British accent, and it'll be fine. I would vote for him. I have to say just for the hair.
For who? For Boris?
Yeah.
Really?
Just for the hair. Come on, it's going to make it so much fun.
Okay.
Yes. And
we're moving on to the States now and to some Obama items. Just before the weekend came in, Obama admitted in a press conference that one of his drone attacks, the U.S. drone attacks, killed 2 hostages on the border of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And this New York Times piece deals with it. They're wondering if this is going to change the strategy of the drone policy. It looks, and the New York Times says that it is not. The only thing that might happen is that they're going to talk about better ways to conduct the war. But this.
No, I shouldn't be laughing. Better ways to conduct the war is actually a brilliant line. Yeah. How can we minimize collateral damage?
Exactly, how to minimize collateral damage, form some kind of fusion center that would link agencies to deal with hostage situations like this. But I think we have to remember that Obama's drone policy killed over 3,000 or 4,000 people. The numbers are kind of conflicting reports there.
Wow.
But he used a lot more than his
predecessor, George W. Bush. And I think it's easy to think bipartisan in these issues, but it is an American policy.
It is.
It is an American policy across the board. Yes.
He doesn't want to put boots on the ground, so this is his way to do that, I guess. And on a lighter note, Obama quickly shifted gears into his comedy routine at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Let's discuss the White House Correspondents' Dinner for a second, which is usually, it's it's like I've been a dentist sitting here going, it's usually the time where a lot of journalists live for this, for the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's become slightly. Well, let's first take a look at what Obama. Let's take a look at what Obama and who he's taking a stab
landed
at.
Some zingers.
After the midterm elections, my advisors asked me, Mr. President, do you have a bucket list? And I said, well, I have something that rhymes with bucket list. Take executive action on immigration? Bucket. New climate regulations? Bucket. It's the right thing to do. 6 years into my presidency, some people still say I'm arrogant and aloof, condescending. Some people are so dumb. No wonder I don't meet with them. I look so old, John Boehner's already invited Netanyahu to speak at my funeral.
That was a fantastic one-liner.
That was, listen, gotta hand it to him.
Gotta hand it. Just a few more things.
We're just gonna let that resonate.
Just a few more. He took some shots actually at the news media as well, of course, at the Correspondents' Dinner. One good one, I think, was that he said the polar vortex caused so many record lows, they renamed it MSNBC because of the really bad ratings that MSNBC is getting.
Yes.
So.
No mention of I-24 News.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're on his radar. I think we're on his radar.
Agenda. Yes.
We have time for another one, I think. Angela Merkel, Germany's leader. Angela.
Sorry,
I'm sorry. That's after the tragedy in the Mediterranean last week, or actually it's almost, I think, 2 weeks already. She wants the Britain to take more refugees. She is claiming that most of them are going to Germany because they are lured by the strong economy. And in fact, she's right. The numbers show that in 2014, 173,000 asylum applications were registered in Germany compared to the UK, which only had 31,000. So she wants people, to she wants refugees to be kind of spread around more.
No, and I
evenly.
think the UK has one of the strictest. And there was also this controversy, I think, last week. A leading or a woman who's I don't even know what party called the refugees cockroaches.
She did.
No. Britain is quite harsh on, but with a great accent.
Yes, just like Boris. Yeah,
exactly. They sound very civilized when they say no to people in need.
Right.
But I would say that on the Syrian refugee crisis, they're in really good company, because if you look at the entire European Union, basically just Germany and Sweden are allowing substantial numbers of refugees to get in. Everybody else, all the other European countries,
shut their doors.
We're talking about hundreds, which the number is obviously laughable in terms of compared to the need
No,
for
definitely.
resettlement. So.
In a conflict that is generating so many refugees, it goes without saying. Europe will remain Europe. There, I said it. As we move along. We're staying with Syria and some breaking news. The Israeli military conducted airstrikes last night in the area between Israel and Syria, targeting a group of militants allegedly trying to plant a bomb on the Israeli border. Now, also this morning, there's been fresh reports of airstrikes within Syria. Israel is denying involvement in that or not saying anything that supposedly killed approximately 30 people, injured dozens, targeting some form of a weapons factory within the Syria area. Now, the Israel Defense Forces said the airstrikes, though, over the weekend were carried out in the occupied Golan Heights against 4 militants, that's the border crossing incident, who crossed into the area from Syria. It came a day after Israeli Air Force carried out 2 sets of strikes on multiple targets on the Syrian-Lebanese border. The attacks targeted a Hezbollah weapons convoy in a heavily militarized area north of Damascus. Now, Syrian President Bashar Assad suffered a series of military defeats in recent days, losing key cities in central Idlib province to rebel forces from the Al-Nusra Front. Assad retaliated with airstrikes, killing dozens, including at least 35 civilians, and thus continues the story of what remains Syria, clearly a non-existent country. And to help us discuss this subject, we are joined in studio by INSS researcher and Tel Aviv University lecturer, Dr. Benedetta Berti. Dr. Berti, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's take a look at the following report and break it down from there.
Another slew of reports on an alleged Israeli airstrike in Syria. Arab media outlets claim the Israeli Air Force struck deep inside Syria near the Lebanese border on Wednesday last week and overnight Friday. The first strike on Wednesday allegedly targeted a Hezbollah weapons convoy. 2 days later, Israeli fighter jets reportedly bombed multiple targets along the border with Lebanon near Syrian military bases, which possesses long-range missiles which could hit deep inside Israel. This area is known to house the 155th and 65th divisions of the Assad military, which are in charge of strategic weaponry, and Israel allegedly targeted the area in the past when it suspected Iranian arms shipments were being delivered to its Lebanese Shiite proxies. Only last month, in the wake of the interim agreement signed between Western powers and Iran, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that Israel would continue to thwart potential threats. The IDF declined to comment on foreign reports, and neither Hezbollah nor the Syrian government have responded to the alleged attacks.
Okay, Dr. Berti of the INSS and Tel Aviv University, I want to start with you, actually, I think with a question that is dominating people who live in the region, or let's say maybe Israelis, to be fair, because all these areas, let's start with the airstrike supposedly carried out by Israel over the course of the weekend, the border incident. I'm getting texts from people I know this morning. Is there a war with Syria between Israel and Syria? That's not the case, is it?
No,
But this is what, the 8th airstrike Israel carried out, or supposedly carried out, over the course of the last several years?
Probably we're a little bit higher in terms of number, but the issue is since the civil war started in Syria, there have been a number of attacks on convoys of weapons towards Hezbollah, allegedly carried out by Israel. I would say the range of targets, the time of operations, the nature of the operations has been escalating in the past 2 years. So the operations have become more visible, more public, bolder. So the tension is there. The tension is there.
If Israel is indeed bombing, and we have to say that because it's always one source, this is mostly directed towards weapon convoys,
absolutely,
Hezbollah activity, etc., etc.
Correct.
The danger, though, right now, though, because Syria, if we're looking at what happened over there with Idlib, I mean, it's not like Syria is organized in any way, shape, or fashion to combat anything back. Okay.
Right. Well, basically, you're summing up what has been Israel's calculation. Israel is pretty much betting on the fact that the Bashar al-Assad regime is busy fighting its own civil war, so there is no really appetite for entering into another war with Israel. So basically, Israel feels that if indeed is behind this action, as you say, we have to say it, then he can take these risks and he will not suffer for it. There will be no retaliation. And that has been proven right to some extent thus far. Right. The problem, of course, is there's plenty of room for escalation. And of course, Hezbollah doesn't have, at this point in time, an interest in a full-on war with Israel because they're also busy fighting in Syria. But it's also not possible for Hezbollah, in terms of popularity, credibility, what have you, not to respond
at all.
Exactly. So if their response goes further than the past one in terms of casualties or in terms of damage, then you can see how the parties can be dragged into a conflict, even though they strategically don't need one.
But what you're describing is this very delicate dance that either side should not be betting on. So, in many ways. But, looking back at Syria for a second, if we're looking, first of all, in Idlib falling to Jabhat al-Nusra, what does that spell for Assad?
Well, for the past few months, everybody was basically saying Assad is close to not victory in the sense
of, exactly.
He did the most. If he gets Aleppo, then he has this big corridor from Damascus to Latakia. He controls the main cities. He controls the main communication arteries. He's basically going to stay there indefinitely. Right. Now, the past, I would say, couple of months have started to make things a bit shakier for Assad. He's starting to lose in the south more and more, and now in the Idlib province, which was always a stronghold of the rebel forces, but in the past 2 months has become much more extensive, much more coordinated. And what I think it's not necessarily a positive trend is that the main group behind this is al-Nusra. And they are not just defeating the Syrian regime, they're also consolidating territory, creating another type of Islamic state.
I was about to ask you, another type of caliphate?
That's their idea. Yeah. I think they've looked at what ISIS is doing, they've looking at this rise of the Islamic State, and they're very much interested also in consolidating power, so not just fighting, but also controlling people, resources, and territory. So yeah.
And then Assad, looking at this situation right now, what does that spell for the relationship of Syria and Lebanon? I mean, this is the type of situation, as you described before, the corridor that Assad is trying to open up. What does this spell for his power in Syria? Assad staying in a small, tiny little area.
I mean, he still controls. I mean, if you look at territory, roughly 1/3. If you look at people, then he controls roughly half of the population. So he's in a position where he's not going anywhere yet, I would say. But at the same time, his war efforts, his ability to keep the economy going are more and more dependent on external sources. In other words, if Iran wasn't bankrolling his entire war enterprise, well, he'd be in a very different position. And if Hezbollah wasn't supporting the fight from Syria. So he's staying, but he's heavily dependent on external assistance.
And here I'm asking you to theorize real quickly. What's going to happen to Syria in the next several years?
The war is going to continue unless something big changes in terms of how the international community sees it and really steps in. I think eventually, and unfortunately it's going to take time, the parties are going to become exhausted. The international supporters are going to see it's not worth it, and eventually they're going to all bring them to a table and they are going to agree to a deal that pretty much looks very similar to the one they had on the cards in 2011.
Dr. Birdie, thank you for being with us. When we get back, an exclusive interview with Times political analyst Joe Klein. Stay with us. First, the news. Good morning, I-24 News on this April 27, 2015, the place to be because Tal Shalev is back.
It's so nice to be back.
There you go, it is. With me in studio, Tal Shalev and Ami Kaufman, and we are going to move straight along. As 6 world powers resume their final stretch of nuclear talks aimed at reaching a comprehensive deal by the end of June, the deep gaps between Jerusalem and Washington linger on. Now, while the Israeli Prime Minister insists that the world has succumbed to a bad deal, in the U.S., more than 60% of the population actually believe in the diplomatic process. I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev, who was in New York and was sitting down with Joe Klein, senior political columnist of Time magazine, had the opportunity to discuss with him what this all means and also the viewpoints over the two sides of the Atlantic. Tal, it's fabulous to have you back. Let's take a look at this interview and break it down from there.
Mr. Klein, thank you for speaking with us.
My pleasure.
I want to start with President Obama. You wrote in the latest issue of Time, 100 most influential people. You declared these past few months as some of the most serious history of his presidency. And I want to ask, because back in the Middle East, people might disagree with that notion. So why do you support the Iran deal so much?
I support the deal because it's the best one that we're going to get, and to my mind, the only alternative to it is war. And under this deal, we at least get 10 years of them not going for a nuclear weapon. And if they live up to their part of the deal with the inspections, and if they don't, we can bomb them then. Also, Iran is the most middle-class country in the region outside of Israel. It has the best educated people. And I think that if we can seduce them past this government, which this deal will help to do, I think that we have a chance of bringing them back in. I have friends who are Iranian radicals who hate this government, who want to see regime change, who love this deal because it's going to undermine the supreme leader, because for the last 30, 40 years they've been calling us the great Satan, and now all of a sudden they're making deals with us. I think that this is a likely way to have them rejoin the community of nations on terms that are favorable to us. And if they don't abide by it, we could do what Bibi seems to want to do in any case, which is bomb them.
Well, we hear the Israeli Prime Minister, he has a lot of mistrust towards the Iranians. Why should the world trust the Iranians in this deal?
Well, when I talk to people from Assad and the other and the Israeli military, they have a very different view of this from Bibi. And when you talk about being trusted, it's kind of hard for me to trust Bibi when one day he says he warns the Israeli people about the Arabs coming to the polls, and the next day he says, never mind. And one day he says, we're only going to have a one-state solution. And the next day he says, never mind. When he makes himself clear on those things, then I'll consider him trustworthy. I don't trust the supreme leader either. But I do trust the international arms inspectors who got it right in Iraq, and who are going to be all over the place there. And if they're not all over the place there, then we shouldn't make the deal.
Do you see any chance for reconciliation between Netanyahu and Obama?
Sure. Netanyahu can stop building settlements on the West Bank, and he can stop mischaracterizing the deal with Iran. If he were telling the truth about Iran, that would be one thing. But he's not. You know, he seems to think he has told Americans and members of Congress that as soon as Iran gets the bomb, they're going to launch on Israel. Why on earth would they do that? You know, they have 12 million people living in Tehran. Why would they want to have those people vaporized 15 minutes later?
You just came back from the campaign trail, started the campaign trail with Hillary Clinton. And probably one of Hillary's challenges is how to maybe distinguish herself from Obama's foreign policy. Do you think Ms. Clinton will be paying a domestic price for Obama's rift with Netanyahu or Obama's foreign policy on Iran?
Well, I don't think that there's a domestic price to be paid for Obama's policy. I mean, the polling shows that it's upwards of 60% of the American people are in favor of a deal with Iran. They're not the noisy 60%. the neoconservatives, or represent a tiny part of this country, and they make an awful lot of noise. But I think that, what she has said, what people like Jim Baker have said, what realists say is that if we can lock down a tight deal that reduces them from 20,000 to 5,000 centrifuges and prevents them from enriching to more than 3.5%, which they are allowed under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, then there is no price to be paid for that domestically in the United States. And I think that, it's about time people started saying the things that aren't said. Like, Israel is not a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The only time any Iranian has ever publicly said that they needed a bomb, it was in 2001, December 2001. It was Ayatollah Rafsanjani. I happened to be there. And he said that Iran needed a bomb to counteract the Israeli nuclear arsenal as a deterrent. Fact is, they're even more worried about the Pakistanis, as am I. I do think that if Israel doesn't want to play in terms of nuclear non-proliferation, which I understand, I want Israel to have the ultimate deterrent capability, shouldn't be so demanding and so harsh about the efforts of other countries, not just the United States, but the European Union, the Russians and the Chinese and the Germans, to find a way other than diplomacy to quiet things down in that region.
Mr. Klein, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Tal Shalev with us in studio. I want to start with clearly Joe Klein. To remind people, Joe Klein is a very distinguished political writer of Time magazine. To those of us, not you, you're too young, just kidding. To those of us who remember Clinton's campaign, the original Bill Clinton campaign, he's the man, he's anonymous, he's the man behind Primary Colors. He's been around many years, he's covered many political campaigns. I'm looking at you sitting and speaking with him. He's also somebody who's very vocal on Iran. But does he represent, or actually I think he does represent, the liberal Jewish lobby in the United States that seems to be very far removed from Netanyahu and speaks very harsh words about the Israeli Prime Minister?
Well, I think he does represent a certain tide in the liberal American Judaism, but he might be on the very far side of it. There is discontent with Netanyahu in many ways. You do hear it, especially amongst the Democratic, the younger circles, not in the more traditional establishment, does support Netanyahu. Right. AIPAC supports Netanyahu, but in New York and California, as we've been hearing from several Congress members that have been speaking up, there is a growing discontent with Netanyahu, and these are people who vote for these lawmakers who we've been hearing the critics of. But Mr. Klein is definitely much more outspoken in his critic towards Netanyahu. He just wrote after Netanyahu was reelected, and clearly he was not satisfied with Netanyahu's reelection. After he was reelected, he wrote a very harsh piece saying that Israel is becoming a bigoted tyrant state. He has blamed Netanyahu for unprecedented internal involvement, and he has this whole enemy of Likud, neocon Republican alliance that wants to push the world for war. So he does take it to the extreme. But there is a tide toward Netanyahu, and especially on the Iran deal, when you do see the numbers amongst the American public.
That's and that's a fascinating bit about this interview, because when he mentions 60% of the American public in favor of an Iranian deal, or the one that's being shaped and formed right now.
Well, Netanyahu would answer or would ask, it's true, 60% of Americans are in favor of a deal, but the question is, what kind of deal? And is this the deal? Is this the ideal deal? And is this the perfect deal? And that is a question which is still being debated and will still be debated until the final deal will be signed. But in any case, it does represent the voice of giving a chance to diplomacy. And I think in many ways he does represent also a part of the Democratic constituency constituents that in the past few months following these two very dramatic moves from Obama, both the Iran deal and the Cuba rapprochement, these are two moves that are definitely creating a new wave of support, or at least re-support, supporters of Obama coming home after being disappointed from him. And as part of coming home, this does mean protecting Obama from Netanyahu's behavior, which definitely in the Congress speech has crossed many lines for many in the American Jewish community.
To put it mildly, no, very, very, very true. And also, and as you said, this kind of the gravitation back to Obama from the core Democratic constituents. Tal Shalev, fascinating stuff. I will, make more use of this interview. I want to thank you. You're locked in studio because we're happy to have you back. Ami Kaufman, try and match that.
I'll do my best. I don't know.
Yes, the web review, the viral spiral that is the web review with Ami Kaufman. Let's take it away.
Right. Well, I think there are two clans that people are talking about in the States right now. It's the Clinton clan,
right,
and the Jenner-Kardashian clan. Those are the clans that are really dominating the news cycle in the States.
Speaking of a feed that was over, at least I know who Bruce Jenner was.
Right.
Not because I'm an avid Kardashian watcher, but I saw a lot of people from around the world going, who's Bruce Jenner?
Yeah, people really close to me. On my Facebook feed, they say I had to Google him. And, that's
Bruce
kind of
Jenner. What's going on? Yeah,
of course, a very famous Olympian, a very famous reality star. Look at this. Here are some pictures.
Yes.
And a transgender who gave a whopping interview to Diane Sawyer on ABC with 17 million people watching.
It was 17.
Yeah, amazing ratings.
17 million! I just want to let you know that the evening editions have like 5 million people watching.
Right.
So 17 is,
million.
Wow.
Yeah, it got rave reviews, and I think we got some,
let's take
some clips.
Let's look at the short clip.
My whole life has prepared me for this moment.
Prepared to disclose a personal truth, kept secret for a lifetime. 39 years of it lived in the public eye, ever since a victory at the 1976 Summer Olympics.
It's been really tough.
Bruce Jenner telling ABC's Diane Sawyer of life as a transgender person, now transitioning to a woman.
Are you a woman?
Yes, for all intents and purposes, I am a woman. I was not genetically born that way. As of now, have all the male parts and all that kind of stuff, but we still identify as female. I would say I've always been very confused with my gender identity since I was this big.
Married and divorced 3 times, most recently to the former Kris Kardashian, matriarch of the Kardashian reality show empire. Jenner spoke of being sexually attracted only to women.
Sexuality is who you are personally attracted to, who you turns you on, male or female. But gender identity is how to do with who you are as a person and your soul.
Jenner told Sawyer of a plan to drop from view and reemerge later as a transgender woman, now revealing for the first time part of why it took so long.
I couldn't come out earlier and be honest because of my children.
And after Friday's interview, support on social media from family members. Kris Jenner tweeting, "My hero." Kim Kardashian, "I love you, Bruce." #proud daughter. Her sister Khloe, "Bruiser, I'm so proud of you." Their responses matching the support from his mother.
I was very proud of you when you stood on that podium in Montreal. I never thought I could be more proud of you. But I'm learning I can be.
Just looking at Bruce Jenner's mother, he's going to make a good-looking woman.
Woman, yeah. She aged well, right?
many. Yeah, Tal Shalev is like, I want to get out of here now.
Oh, come on.
No, 17 million. The only thing I'll say about, these interviews, the mechanism behind it was like 17 edit rooms and everybody. But
yes.
America responded with a lot of positivity.
A lot of positivity, especially for Diane Sawyer, who did a really good job. Didn't ask the usual questions about, body parts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
She really focused on the real mental and psychological issues about it. It was a really respectable interview. And also
As
on
opposed
that...
to, I have to say, reminiscent of much better than you don't remember the Elian Gonzalez interview that you did, guys, did you? when Elian Gonzalez
see it,
was
but,
was 4 years old.
Right.
Yes. No, this was much better. Okay.
This was better, right?
This was much better.
And apparently he didn't get any money for the interview. That's an important point.
That's which is commendable, and I think being part of the Kardashian, reality machine, though, you don't need it.
They got enough money, but
there's that.
okay.
Well, we have 1 minute left.
1 minute
really
left.
quickly.
Just another guy, totally different story. Richard Dean Anderson. You guys remember MacGyver, the show?
Yes!
Okay, so this photo is going all over the web. It's totally viral. Someone caught him shopping, and they're going crazy about him that he really looks horrible.
So
and I want
sad.
your opinion because I think, this is already, there's a difference here of 30 years, I think. I think he's not that, I think he aged all right. Come on. Don't be so hard on him.
No, I mean,
Really?
I love that as a man you're trying to give excuses to that, but no.
Really?
I never liked him to begin with, so it's
I'm
disappointed.
Even then,
Even then. It's not all the time we have. I'm going to be fixing the Spen MacGyver style, but do stay with us. When we get back, something entirely different but incredibly exciting. It's Google News. Yes, stay with us. First, the news. Good morning. I-24 News Morning Edition. I'm up. Okay.
You're up.
I'm up. It is still April 27th, I believe, 2015. It is the place to be because we're joined not just by Benjamin.
Thank you.
There you go. Chong Alvarez, but also by Shai Ringo and his fabulous colored shirt.
Fabulous.
I'm getting laughs from him. Yes. But we're going to start first with Benjamin Chong Alvarez of The Economy Magazine, the host, the man, the one and only. What do you have for me?
I am the one and only.
You are the one and only.
Well, we're going to talk about Argentina and Russia, specifically Russia, which has been casting its web of contacts or allies as wide as possible. We saw, of course, Alexis Tsipras, the Prime Minister of Greece, meeting with Vladimir Putin in Russia over Orthodox Easter weekend. Right. And now we see also the rapprochement, so to speak, of Argentina and Russia happening over energy. Similarly, as we saw with Gazprom in Greece, now Gazprom in Russia.
Interesting.
Very, very interesting. And there's various routes, really, that apparently Argentina and Russia have that they can go on.
And before we continue, we have also Putin.
Yeah, we have a comment by Putin.
Yeah, President Putin saying the following, as before we discussed the edging and the attempt of Russia to reestablish. I don't know if it's reestablish, but to solidify more power.
Not reestablish.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a listen to what Mr. Putin had to say.
Russia and Argentina are developing cooperation in the energy sector. Around 20% of electricity in Argentina is produced using Russian equipment. Turbines supplied by our company, Power Machine, are installed on 2 big hydroelectric power stations in Argentina.
Well, the bit that I find interesting about this, first of all, actually, Benjamin, you start. When it comes to Russia and Argentina, the first thing that comes to mind, of course, with Argentina is the whole Iranian mess and the lawyer that was killed there. But I'll make that connection later on the conspiratorial note. But what does this mean financially, economically for both countries if they're edging together, if they're cooperating at this point?
Honestly, this is really more of a political story than an economic story, because if we look at what Argentina and Russia are talking about in terms of cooperation, we have a hydroelectric plant that they're planning to build, that Russia's planning to build in Argentina, and Argentina has had a lot of blackouts, has had serious issues with their power. So it's a welcome change, it's a welcome addition to Argentina. However, a much bigger deal that was being discussed is actually on shale formations in the Patagonia region. Which would cost about $200 billion of investment. Now, Russia has Gazprom. Russia has basically the biggest gas producer in the world, practically, okay? They don't need to go to a different country to explore gas, especially when they're under pressure and they can't actually sell their own gas as it is. So it's a very unlikely, it's an unlikely link, it's an unlikely contract to really see realized in the coming years. Of course, for Argentina, it would be a game changer, a game changer.
A game changer to do what for them? I mean, show me, for example.
Aside from the fact that it would obviously, greatly ease their situation in terms of power. I mean, $200 billion coming in investment, huge. I mean, this country has been cut off from the world now for the past couple of months because of the holdout hedge funds, the whole issue that we had with Judge Thomas Grisa essentially saying, you have to pay these guys first. and that putting them in a very difficult situation. There's too much to talk about here.
And I agree. And it looks as if we're talking about solidifying, we're looking at Putin going and reaching out to all these countries that the United States is not in very good contact with.
Exactly. And it's not just Putin reaching out. It's Fernandez Kirchner reaching out. It's Tsipras reaching out. I mean, they're all reaching out because they're all in the same position. They're all essentially pariahs at this point. They've all been ostracized for one reason or another, you know, whether it's economic or political. And it's very interesting to see these alliances. Yeah, to see these alliances form.
Yeah, and the new world order, so to speak, in many ways.
So to speak, yeah.
And this is all that we can, and these are the things that we can expect on your show, I'm assuming.
Well, yeah, it's one of the things that we will be talking about.
It's one of the things. The Economy magazine, what time?
Of 7:10.
7:10. Anything else for us today? No, we're good.
Well, we can talk about Nepal if you want, but I don't want to take too much time away from this wrangle here.
No. Please.
Absolutely.
Because we started the show with Nepal, and there was one question that was in my mind when it all began, which was how long will it take to rebuild this place? Yes, but economically,
I don't have the answer to that. But economically, I mean, you're looking at the numbers, specific numbers. I mean, in terms of direct losses, we see about $3.5 billion in direct losses. Okay, when you talk about replacement reconstruction costs, $5.5 billion. When you talk about the human toll, as many people have basically died in this disaster. It's about 25%, they say, of GDP. All of these numbers don't necessarily mean a tremendous amount, but for a country that has been living off foreign aid first until the 60s, essentially the majority of its income was foreign aid. After the 60s, foreign loans. We're talking about a country that is obviously in a horrible, horrible situation economically, never has really been so well, and countries have for a long time been reluctant to give money because a lot of the money wasn't really registered properly. It sort of disappeared, in pockets here and there. Underused.
And overpopulated, underdeveloped, not organized is the mild understatement when you look at that.
Right.
But when you look at this devastation, you're thinking there probably is going to be a lot of headlines of people promising aid at this point, or international aid in terms of.
The aid might trickle in, but the U.S. so far had said $1 million. Right?
That's
and
what they
China
said?
had
1
said
million?
1 million. China had said about $3.3 million. Now this is a lot of money for but not when you look at the devastation that we've seen. And if you keep in mind, it's about $10 billion, in terms of losses, replacement, reconstruction, and then we're not even talking about the intangible effects in terms of the loss to families, cultural relics, religion. I mean, this country has been really hit very, very hard.
Very, very bad, and as we said before in the show, reminiscent of the Haiti situation back in 2010.
Right.
But in this respect, I think just even worse when it comes to rebuilding Nepal, and the efforts and the money that will be needed, devastating to say the least.
Yes.
Again, you'll be taking a closer look at all of these issues on the Economy magazine every day on I-24 News
at 7:10.
At 7:10.
Thank you so much.
Benjamin, thank you for being with us. Shai Ringer. Death, destruction, and Google.
And now Google.
And now Google, yes. Although, I mean, on the Nepalese issue, and it's a terrible, horrific thing to mention, but, all reports we haven't really touched on that the Google executive also passed away and, was killed in one of the avalanches. Yeah. But this is a different Google story. Yes.
Yeah. Besides that, let's talk about Google in the United States, because Google has launched a new service called Google Fi, and it's a very interesting service because if it will work, if the experiment will work, we are going to think a whole differently of how we use our phone and how we connect to our service providers.
Even more so than now? Okay.
Yeah. We have a small clip from their ad to Google Fi.
Let's have a look and then see how Google yet again, and once again, will change our lives.
With Project Fi, we wanted to build a wireless experience really from the ground up. As you move around the world, there are different networks that are strong in different places. In your home, the Wi-Fi might be strongest. On your commute, a cellular network might be strongest. And the cellular network near your office might be different from the cellular network near your home. What Project Fi does is very seamlessly move people between networks depending on where they are.
That can really help you transform the way you communicate and give you the best connectivity you need wherever you are.
Yeah, let's
No, can I
try
say
to.
something? You know why these people freak me out?
Why?
I don't understand a word they're saying. Listen, I don't know what.
So
okay.
let's let's explain what they're trying to say here. The idea is this: while we're on going out on this urban environment with our cellular, and we want to phone someone, we use the phone antennas, you know, instead of the Wi-Fi. There's a lot of hotspots, a lot of Wi-Fi spots around the city that you can connect and, you know, get a very good signal. We don't need so many antennas anymore, especially when we're in the city. What Google wants to do is a thing called Wi-Fi first, which means that if the phone finds a good Wi-Fi spot, it will connect firstly to the Wi-Fi. If it won't find any Wi-Fi spot, it automatically will search for the antenna no matter what the company that antenna belongs to is. Which means that instead of me connecting to, in the United States, let's say Verizon or AT&T, all the cellular providers, I'm going to connect to Google. I'm going to pay for Google.
God.
Yes.
Oh God, that's terrifying.
Yes, I'm going to pay for Google. When I'm in the city, Google will find the best Wi-Fi spot for me.
While taping all my calls. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's the...
No, that's a different subject, but let's first explain what that means. They'll first find a Wi-Fi connector. Then if they won't find any of that, they will negotiate with AT&T and Verizon and all those companies in order to get you the best connection. But you will pay less money and you will pay it for Google. Also, Google says that you can, let's say, pay for it's $10 for any gigabyte of use, of data use. And let's say that you are paying...
Chinese. Too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
It's too much here, but for the in the United States, it's a lot less than they pay now. They pay like for the unlimited amount, $100 a month per user.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, ridiculous amounts
Really
because
bad reception.
Yeah, because it's a monopoly in the United States, and in Europe we don't understand it, but in the United States all the communication.
But I mean, I'm moving along just because this is. If I can conclude this as another way Google is going to rule the world. Okay.
Certainly increase its influence.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, that was a beautifully PC way of putting it. Listen to him, not me. Yes, moving along.
Moving along. Okay, let's talk about a very nice development from this research lab at MIT. It's
MIT.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I don't know if anybody will use it, but we kind of liked it, so we have a video of it.
Let's have a look and see if I like it.
Current wearable technologies get smaller and thinner and closer to the human body. There's this greater need and desire to be able to personalize the appearance of these devices to make them more appealing to wear. And so Nailo is a miniaturized trackpad comparable to the size of a commercialized nail art sticker. Because of its small size, it is very subtle and discreet. So let's say that today I want to very subtly change the color of an accessory I'm wearing. When I enter or exit a certain social scenario, I can very easily do that with my fingernail. And also because it's on your fingertip, this is like a very natural and unobtrusive location. We have a lot of gestures using our fingers. So let's say today my hands are full. Perhaps you're busy cooking with both of your hands, but you want to scroll through like a recipe. Then you can use Nailo as a third hand to help you do so.
Yeah, you've just seen the future.
I gotta tell you, so this will never work.
This will never work.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Women, manicures. Are you kidding me? No.
That means you don't have to get a manicure
Sure,
anymore.
that doesn't happen. No, that doesn't happen. Yeah, unless, we get the pastel colors and whatnot. But yeah, if it came like a French manicure.
No, it will come in, different shapes and different, and
but
it's
kind of creepy.
It's inspired, it's inspired by a fad that they have in Korea, which they put like different nail tops on.
Right.
So that's the inspiration, and it's kind of cool when you think about it that you can do those gestures and control
it,
screens
but from here rather than do that.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, rather than with your hands.
But the idea is that a lot of people are trying to think about the screens of tomorrow and the way that we'll connect to those screens.
Good point.
And using a small device and something that can be very intuitive to everybody, that can change the way we think about wearables.
I know. I mean, I know everybody. I know it's the future. I mean, I'm of an old generation. I do not want to wear my computer. I don't want to wear my technology, and I'm looking at that and thinking, I mean, it is a step forward, and you're right, you know.
Eventually you have a beauty spot, you'll just go.
Exactly. It's something like that.
You know, there's a whole subject called biohacking, when we put devices inside our bodies, and the way that will connect to our computers will be with chips that are under our skin.
Oh, God.
Let's say your key to your door at home will be here all the time.
And this is, I don't want to wear my technology, and I do not want it implanted in my body.
So instead of planted in your body, it's going to be very not, you know, it's
invasive.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's going to be just on your fingertip, and you can pull it off
you
whenever
can do
you want.
things like this. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if the user interface is still good, but the idea itself, it's kind of cool.
It's getting there. It's getting there. Again, I don't think this is going to work with women.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying. Boys, I shouldn't have called you boys. Men, thank you for joining me in the studio this morning. Yeah, man, this is the time we have. ICANN Founders Morning Edition. Do stay with us, and of course, tune in tomorrow morning for another edition of your Morning Edition, the place you should be, because this is where we're telling you everything about wearable technology, and you get to meet Shai Ringel and his fabulous colored shirt. So, thank you, and stay with us for the news.